You're tuned in to the Dr. Kinney Show, and I'm your host, Dr. Erin Kinney, a naturopathic doctor and speaker dedicated to unraveling the mysteries of your body and guiding you back into balance. Let's get started. Hey, everyone. Welcome back to another episode of the Dr. Kinney Show. This week, I'm really pleased to have joining me Jodie King, who is an artist, instructor, a speaker, and a podcast host. And she helps people find their truest higher self through art. And I'm really excited to hear her story and have this conversation to share with you about her work. So thanks, Jodie, for being here.
Oh, thank you. I love talking about this. It's like I could go on forever.
Yeah. So can we start by you sharing your story? And how did you get to this place and doing the work you do?
Sure. Absolutely. Well, I've been a professional artist for over 20 years. But that just is because I'm old. So, my mid-50s. And I just stuck to it with my ADD brain. It's surprising that I stuck to this thing for so long. But I was not the kid that thought they were going to grow up to be an artist at all. I didn't start painting until I just woke up one day and thought, oh my gosh, I think I want to paint. And I was 35. But I think like so many of us, especially as women, I did not identify as an artist for, like I said, for years. And I think that's because when I was in third grade, I was in art class, and our art teacher, at the time we would only have art once a week. And I don't even know if they do that anymore. It's so sad. But once a week we would do art. And this particular week, our teacher brought by lumps of clay, and she put lumps of clay in front of each of us. We're at those like long cafeteria tables, like one after the other. And so she put the clay in front of all of us, and she said that we were supposed to form it into a mushroom and paint it. And then next week it will be, while we're gone, it'll be fired in the kiln. We'll get our mushrooms back. And so that's what I did, is I formed my piece of clay into a mushroom, but I had some leftover clay. And so I rolled the leftover clay into little balls, and I put them on top of the mushroom. And then I painted those little balls different colors in the mushroom. And then the next week, we were all getting our fired mushrooms back, all shiny with color. And she put them in front of each of the kids. And as she was going down the row, she would say, like, David, I love that blue, and so, I love that whatever. And she got to me and she said, Jodie, those little balls were not part of the assignment. And in that moment, I determined for myself that I was not an artist. That was not who I was. And of course, now I know, bitch, I'm probably the most creative person here.
Because, you took the assignment, you did it, but you embellished upon the assignment, right?
Absolutely. I am creative. But this is a story for so many of us. There's a study that was done where they went into kindergarten classrooms, and they said, everyone who's an artist, raise your hand. And 100% of the kids raised their hands, right? And then they went into fourth grade classroom, and they said, everyone here who's an artist, raise your hand. And half the kids raised their hand.
Wow.
And then they went to middle school, and only one child raised their hand.
Really?
And so I think what that's about is that, we start getting sorted into, who we are. And for me, I determined that I was not this. I self-sorted, of course she helped me. There are judgment. I should work with my anger sports.
But if it wasn't for her, it probably sounds like you might not have had your journey, right?
Exactly. So what I think we do self-sort. I'm not this, I am that. And the truth is, especially as women, we are all of the things within us, but we quiet some of that stuff down. And often what we're quieting, at least like I said, a lot of the women I work with, they just decide in their 50s they want to start painting, and they are just off to the races, and they are determined to do this thing. And then, I am lucky enough to get to work with them. But what happens is they find their voice within their art. And then there's this alchemy that happens, and they just start excavating more and more of who they are. And they're kind of remembering what those creative juices felt like. They start remembering all of these wonderful things about themselves, and they turn themselves inside out and they put it on a canvas.
So question, what brought you back to realizing that you were an artist?
Oh, great question. So I was 35 and I had young kids at home, and I was married. We had a business. We had a wine bar, and it was really successful. I had a really full, beautiful life, lots of friends, but I didn't know who I was very much, right? I knew I was a wife. I knew who I was, a mother. I knew I was a friend. I knew who I was to other people, but I didn't think I knew who I was for me. But that is absolutely not why I started painting. I started painting just because I felt like I needed something for myself, just for me. That felt really good. And again, I had no idea what I was doing. This is important to know that this was 20 something years ago. There was no YouTube. There was barely any internet there. So I didn't go to art school. So figuring out how to paint was, a little bit more challenging than it is now. But there was an artist. I woke up, it was actually on a New Year's Day, we're thinking about, what do I want to do this year? And we were with a big group of people, and one of the guys there painted. And I said, hey, David, you know what? I want to paint this year. And he looks at me dumbfounded, and he goes, so, just paint. And I go, oh no, I don't know how to paint. And he goes, just paint. Right? It's like, I didn't realize I could just do something for fun that felt good without having to quote, be an expert to know how. I could just do it for fun. And when I started painting, it unlocked some kind of remembering of something. And then, yeah. And I see it happen all the time now.
That's
with
so
other,
cool.
Other women that I work with, or not just women, men as well.
That's super cool. Sorry, this is a little random, but do you know the children's book, The Dot?
No.
Okay, you have to go read this book. So it is a book about I think it's a little boy or a little girl who's in art class and doesn't want to draw anything. And, the teacher's like, please draw something. And she's like, I'm not a good artist. And they're like, just put something. And so the child puts a dot on the paper, and the teacher's like, that's beautiful. Please sign it. And the next day the child comes to class, and the teacher has framed the dot above her desk. And the student is like, oh my gosh. And then the student starts painting lots of dots, like colored dots and big dots. And then there's a whole art show of these different dots. And this little child, like, it unlocks, this cool creative side of them. And then, at the end of the book, the child is like teaching, I think, a younger brother or a younger student. And the student's like, I can't draw a line. And like, the guy's like, just draw a line. And she draws the line. And then she's like, please sign it. And then it kind of like, but it was such a cool, like, thinking about that moment where you were like, oh, I wasn't an artist, like how that teacher really were like, hey, this is amazing. I'm going to frame this. Like, you just did it. You didn't need training. You just put a dot on the paper. Like,
yes. Oh, I love it.
Book.
I can't wait to get
It's beautiful illustrations too. You should check it out. I think it's Peter Reynolds is the author. It's Peter Reynolds. It's a great little children's book.
Peter Reynolds. Okay. I will. I see that often in my work is people say, oh, I'm not an artist. So I don't know how to draw. I don't know how this, I don't know. And it's like, just start, like the dot. Have you heard the saying, there was a child that was drawing something, and the teacher comes by and says, what are you drawing? And they said, well, this is God. And she said, oh, sweetie, nobody knows what God looks like. And the child said, they do now.
Oh my gosh, I love that. That's amazing. They do. Think about that confidence. That's great.
Yeah, I love it.
Yeah. Well, so I think what's so cool about, the work that you're doing, from my perspective, I work a lot with the physical body, and particularly the nervous system, and getting the nervous system to relax. And when you're doing any sort of creative, particularly painting or art or singing, usually the nervous system can't be in that fight flight state. It has to come out into like a more regulated nervous system state, kind of more the relax, the rest and digest relaxed state. So it's such a healthy practice for the physical body because it calms you down. It feels good, right? To be doing art. Like it takes your mind off of things. It just like, and you have to be kind of in that flow state. And that's so healthy for the physical body. And, I work with a lot of women. We were talking offline before the show that, they're either going through perimenopause or menopause and they don't feel right. They don't even know what they like to do. Their physical body doesn't feel great. They're not finding much joy. And sometimes, I will suggest like, hey, I want you to find something, whether it's some sort of creative outlet that feels good. And sometimes they'll do it, but I usually will know when someone is better physically because they'll come to me and they'll be like, hey, I started taking a pottery class, or I took up painting again, or I've been singing. And that to me, it's like, I'm like, oh, yes, they've made it. They're being creative again. That's amazing. Like, but I think anytime you can add creativity to, your wellness or lifestyle practice, it's so helpful for every single part of your physical well-being and your mental well-being and your emotional well-being. And I'm sure you can speak to that, right?
I 100% agree. And in fact, there's some scientific studies that back up. I'm sure you know this, that back up what you're saying. There's a book called Your Brain on Art, and they discovered that even 45 minutes of creative anything once a week, just 45 minutes, and it doesn't even have to be good, right? Because that's what we want to do. We don't want to do anything unless it's good. Just 45 minutes of any creative endeavor once a week has the same effect of a daily meditation practice.
I actually had not seen that study. That's amazing. It makes sense.
It's fascinating. And that is my experience as well, with art. And then there was also a book that was written by the Nagoski sisters called Burnout. And Burnout, really talks to how there's a 3-part stress cycle. And I first heard about this because Brene Brown was interviewing the Nagoski sisters on her podcast. And she said to the Nagoski sisters, I learned something today I never knew. Now, when Brene says she learned something, I'm like, well, I definitely don't know it.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, of course. She knows everything.
Yeah. So she said, I didn't realize that that our bodies had a 3-part cycle. So what the Nagoski sisters found with stress is that we don't burn out, or we don't, however you want to determine burnout, which is, lack of emotional attachments, depression, all of the things that come with burnout. We don't burn out because of the stress that we're under, the inciting stress, or maybe it's a medical issue. We don't burn out because of that. It's because of the cycle. So we have the stressor is the first thing. The second part of the cycle is it gets stuck in our bodies. Now it's in our bodies. The third part of the stress cycle is we move it through. And they determined that there were 7 different ways that we could move the stress through our bodies, 7 different ways. And one of those ways was art and creativity. So it just proves that we do start feeling better after some sort of creative practice, because we are literally allowing our limbic system to calm down and to let that flow through us.
Yeah. It's almost like, art, music, or anything. It's a process. It allows your system to process things. I probably need to paint. I like it. I do puzzles. That is my current, which I guess you could count as creativity, but it gets me into a super relaxed flow state. And actually, I've just realized that my anxiety has been a little bit high the last week, and I haven't been doing a puzzle. I need to get a puzzle out again. But I feel like when I'm in that state, I'm focused on something. It's a little bit creative. I have to see all the things, and I can process things without being too I can think about my day. I can think about things coming up, but it doesn't seem too it's not too pressing, right? Because I'm in the moment doing the puzzle. And I think when you're in any sort of artistic, creative state, your brain can safely think about those things, but it also is focused on I don't know. I mean, maybe you can talk a little bit about that. Would you agree that it's a nice way to process things?
I completely agree. And there's, I know your listeners can't see, but there's right behind me, there's something called, I've written the creative process, and I keep this in my studio intentionally because as we write, as we paint, as we do any sort of creative endeavor, we go through a creative process. And the first stage of the creative process, there's 6 stages. The first stage is, this is awesome. This is going to be awesome, right? It's like rainbows and unicorns. And then the second stage is, this is tricky. And the third stage is, this is shit. And the fourth stage is, I am shit. And the fifth stage is, this might work. And the sixth stage is, again, this is awesome. Now, what happens is we tend to, I'm telling you, I've been doing this 20 plus years. If there's a painting behind me, I'm stuck right in the middle of this. It happens with 100% of the paintings. But because I am aware of the process, I know I'm just in the middle of this bad part, right? Yeah. I know that if I don't give up, if I stick with it and I use the tools that I have for myself, I can move through this and get to the end. Sadly, what so many of us do as artists or just as creatives, or, we start the painting, the pottery class, the writing, the book, whatever it might be. We start it and we get to, this is shit. And we decide, we self-select and decide we are not an artist. We are not a writer. We are not that. When in fact, we are just in the middle of the creative process. So what I like to help women do, or I don't know why do I keep going back to women? What I like to help artists do, what I like to help them do is to get excited about doing something creative, and then celebrating with them, especially in a workshop, celebrating with them when they get to that messy middle, because they have the courage to keep pushing past that safety place, right? And I think that's what we do in life as well. We get to this comfort, this safety place, and we call it who we are, because we're so afraid that we're going to get to this issue that I am, and that's just life. Life is going to life us, right? Yeah. We just have to keep going, keep getting through it.
So it's almost
such a beautiful metaphor.
Yeah. I was going to say, it's almost like doing the artistic process is practicing and building resilience for life. It's like, hey, if I can get through this, then when this other thing comes up and you think about, like, anyone who's listening who's run a business, like when you first get it, you're so excited and you're like, oh, this is great. And I'm going to get all this going. And then you're like, oh, this might be a little tricky. There's little things. And then there's usually a time where you're like, oh my God, what the f was I thinking starting this business? This is so hard. But then if you stick with it, through the tough time, you always will come out on the other side and it'll be like, great. Okay. I stuck with it. This is amazing. Like, I did a great job. So yeah, I think it's a beautiful way to kind of build your body's resilience to life.
Absolutely. It's exactly what happens. And, speaking of the business part, you get to the point where you're like, what the f was I thinking? This is terrible. And then you do usually get to, maybe it's at 3 a.m., but it's, who did I think I was? Who did I think I am doing this?
Who am I to start this or bring this to the world? Or, and this could be also, like we were talking earlier about podcasting, I think I was really excited, and I still love the podcast, but there are definitely times where I'm like, behind on recording, and like, or we were talking about tech stuff is not working. I'm like, why did I think this was a good thing? Or when, you look at your stats, you're like, oh, the stats weren't good this month or whatever. But, you keep doing it and you just keep at it. So I guess that's the point, is like, keep through get through the shit and you'll come in on the other side.
100%. And as we were saying earlier, when people say, what do you do? It would be really easy to say, I'm a podcaster, I'm a teacher, I paint, or whatever. But truly what I do at my highest, in my highest service is I help people excavate their truest, highest selves through the use of art and creativity. But to your point of what you just said, I think the way we do that is through building resilience within ourselves. Because it translates, the art process, the creative process translates to every area of our lives.
Yeah. It's also, I'm thinking too of anyone who's listening who's gone through any sort of, healing endeavor, when you're like dealing with something and you come, especially in alternative medicine, you come and you're like super excited. You're like, this is going to be great. And then, sometimes taking a protocol or changing your lifestyle can be tricky. And sometimes, depending on what you're working on, sometimes you might get a little bit worse before you get better. And so I can kind of see this process sometimes in patients that I'm working with. They come in, they're like super excited, I'm going to make these changes. Then they come in, they're like, wow, it was really hard to change my diet. This is, take all these supplements and do these things and go to bed. And then sometimes you do have a worsening before you get better. But usually if they stick with it, they'll come out the other side. So this is a perfect metaphor for so many different aspects of life.
100%. Absolutely.
Yeah. So tell me how you work with people. Are you working with people virtually, or what does your work look like?
Good question. So I do work with people in person. I have several different programs right now. Last weekend, I have my highest touch program, my highest level mentoring program is called Studio Elite. People can find out more about that on my website. But what I love that, cause it's a close-knit small group of people. And then this next coming up week, I am teaching an in-person workshop in Santa Fe, New Mexico. And so that's going to be, 15 people, and we're going to work together for 5 days painting and,
cool. So a little bit like a retreat
process.
Is it a little bit like a retreat? So you can come, so anyone can come, and that's very cool.
Yeah, it's a retreat. And then in June, I'm teaching in Tuscany.
Oh, amazing.
So I have several things that I do in person. And people can find out more about working with me in person on my website. But, and then I have other virtual that, of course I've got my podcast.
Yeah.
But I have
Which is called what, by the way? What's your podcast called?
It's called the Honest Art Podcast.
Oh, fantastic.
And honest art is, it's a term that I coined years ago, and it just means the art that only you can make. It comes, through us onto the canvas or to whatever your substrate is. It's whatever that's uniquely you. So I have some online programs. I teach a lot of artists about business, how to create a thriving business. Because I was an entrepreneur for years and years. Well, I still am, but I was an entrepreneur for years before I ever picked up a paintbrush. And so when I started, I became an accidental artist. And so I just started applying all these business skills to my art, and it was successful. And because I wasn't indoctrinated into that starving artist kind of rhetoric, because I never had any intention of being an artist. So when I started painting, I'm like, well, hell yeah, I can do this.
Yeah. That's amazing.
Yeah. It's funny what you do when you don't have the conditioning around it. And then later I thought, who the hell am I to do this? But at first it was the creative process, right?
It was the creative process. Yeah. Oh man.
Exactly.
All right. So we've got online programs, in-person program. That's super cool. And the podcast to check out. So lots of ways that you can kind of get this work out into the world.
Yes. And I would just say, if anybody has any sort of creative inkling, any tiny little bit of curiosity about a creative endeavor, whether it's singing, taking dance classes, painting, writing, whatever it might be, to listen to that. Absolutely listen to that, because there's a saying, no artist creates alone. No artist creates alone, meaning there is something in the universe, spirit, God, however you want to say it, that needs to be birthed through you.
That's really cool.
And just allow that. Follow that tiny bit of curiosity. You don't have to have an aha. You don't have to change your life and become an artist and sell it professionally. Just listen to that little bit of curiosity, because something is going to come through.
Well, and it's, I feel like being creative, like it brings you joy mostly, right? When you're in it, especially that first part. And it's funny when I sometimes I ask my patients, hey, what do you do? What hobbies do you have, or what do you kind of do that's for fun or for you? And a lot of my, particularly my busy mom patients that are running a business, everything they do has like a purpose. So like, well, I have to get this done. I have to get this done. It's always that kind of, I have to do this. And it's never the like, I want to do this. And I think sometimes you're like, oh, well, I could take a painting class, but it's kind of like what they think, like, what would be the point of that? Like, I'm not accomplishing anything with that. It's not but the point is to do it because you feel good doing it. Right. And like, it's good to do things that feel good. And I think I like this conversation for those of you who are listening that are like, oh yeah, I would never do that because it's not really like, it's not going to accomplish anything, but you are actually teaching your brain and your body these great skills that can be applied in other parts of life. So there is a point to it, right? Like a little bit more than
there's such a point to it.
There's such a, like,
what are we all trying to get to? I mean, I feel like if I see somebody who has such a beautiful practice like you have, if we do any of these things, I think ultimately what we're trying to get to is health, vitality, and joy, right?
Yes.
That's, I think we're trying to get there. So that's the point.
It's the point. Fun. Yeah, it is the point. Yeah. But sometimes I think in our culture, we've kind of missed that. We think because we all want things because the way we think that thing or that accomplishment is going to make us feel. And most of us want to feel what we just said. We want to feel joy and we want to feel good. But sometimes we think, if my schedule's like this and my kids go and then I'm going to feel good. But oftentimes that, so you got to do the thing that feels good now. It's don't wait, because it might come, but it's good to add that into your life so that your life feels good. I've noticed, like I said, I haven't been doing my puzzle the last couple of weeks, and I was on vacation a couple of weeks ago, which is always great. And it's always hard to come back. The week you come back from vacation, you're like, oh gosh, there's a lot of things to do, and it feels like a little harder than it felt before. But I've just been noticing I haven't been doing my creative, practices, and I don't feel as good. The stuff doesn't feel as good. When I'm doing that, I feel like all the stuff that I've scheduled, it's fun. It feels more fun. Life feels more fun, I think, when you have a creative outlet of some kind.
Right. But you make a really good point. I don't think our culture in particular elevates it to the level of importance that it really, really does have in our life, to our mental well-being, our physical well-being, all the people that we come in contact with. I was listening to an interview. I'm sorry, I can't remember the name, but this guy was talking about how he decided for this particular year that he was going to prioritize fun for the year. And so he set an alarm for 3 times a day to, when the alarm went off, he had to take a break from what he was doing and he had to do something that was fun, whether it's kitchen dancing or he was a skateboarder. He was older, old, 56, like me. Mm. And he would get on a skateboard. So old, right?
So old.
He would get on a skateboard. But it's fun is different for everyone.
Yeah.
And he said that year he had made more in revenue, sales and revenue in his company than any other year. So for all of us busy moms, raising kids, running business, fun is important. It is important not only to us, but it can be important to the bottom line.
Yeah, it can be important to the bottom and to all kinds of things. I think when you're in fun and in that flow state, I don't know. Are you an Abraham Hicks fan? Do you listen to Abraham?
Oh yeah, I love her.
I sometimes touch on Abraham on the show.
Or I said, sorry, them.
Oh yeah, them. Esther, they, the beings. And if you aren't familiar with Abraham Hicks, go Google them or Esther Hicks and give it a listen. But, they always talk about when you're in you're in the vortex, you're in this good, you're in the moment, you're living in the center of the hourglass. You're not thinking about bottom line, but then you do end up manifesting everything you've ever wanted. So it's I think we just need to relax a little bit more. Go take the painting class, take the pottery class, go do a course with Jodie, do something that, ignites this creative piece of you, and your life will astound you probably in how amazing it can be.
100%. It will astound you. It will. We were talking before the podcast that I was teaching a workshop one time here in Austin, and there was this woman that first time she had taken a workshop with me. She was almost 70, and she had been raised in the South in the U.S., which there's a lot of I think expectations for girls growing in the South. This is how you pray. This is how you brush your legs. This is what you wear. This is what you say. And nice girls don't do this. And she was raised in that whole, under that experience. And now she was almost 70 and she took a workshop with me. Something unlocked in her. And by the 4th day, which is the last day, she came to me and said, I just want you to know I'm going to miss the last several hours of the workshop. And I said, well, no problem. But out of curiosity, what are you doing? And she said, I've always wanted a tattoo. So
I love it. It's such a great story. You're like, yes, girl, we unlocked it.
Absolutely. Go get that. Right. And so it was beautiful. I thought it was a great example of just what art and creativity and embracing joy and just the fun of remembering who we really are.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, this has been an amazing chat. So we'll put all the links to all of your stuff in show notes, but best place for people to start is with your website. Just check your website out.
JodieKing.com. My name is spelled Jodie King.com, but the podcast is Honest Art, the Honest Art Podcast. Yeah. Or you can follow me on Instagram, Jodie_King. Yep.
Awesome.
Love to see you.
Thank you so much, Jodie. And thank you guys for listening. And we'll see everyone next week. Thank you for tuning in today. If you enjoyed this conversation, be sure to connect with me on social media and leave a rating and/or a review. This helps grow the show so more people have access to this knowledge that leads to empowered healing. Love and light, and see you next week.